Hello, this is Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, talking today about Planet Money's recent coverage of Magic the Gathering. This is super exciting to me because Magic is an interesting economic system where the cards have held value for 20 plus years. And as far as I can tell, they're going to continue to hold value for the next 10 or 20 years. I also highly recommend this episode because it explains the basics of Magic the Gathering as a collectible in layman terms that anyone can understand. If you've got friends or family that are confused by why you play Magic, why you invest in Magic, why you're involved in this community after 5 or 10 years, definitely refer them to this article. It explains a lot of the interesting things going on in Magic that aren't there in other collectibles. I also want to point out that although I'm going to be a little bit critical of this podcast, it's a very strong podcast. It's not targeted at you and I, the hardcore Magic players, collectors, YouTubers. It is aimed at a general public audience. I'm going to be pointing out some critiques, but overall, the article is very good. What really drew people into this particular article is the bubble, the idea that Magic could crash at any point in time. Talking to local game stores, they're always concerned about this idea of a bubble, of a particular game or a fad crashing. These bubbles typically last a year to 3 years. The prices shoot through the roof and then they crash to where they're worth almost nothing afterwards. Some examples of bubbles are comic books, sports cards, Beanie Babies, and Pogs. I've lived through all of these. They've been interesting to watch, and I've definitely learned a lot from them. But why hasn't Magic succumbed to the same type of bubble economics that all of the other collectibles have succumbed to? The article points out several things, including the creation of a Pro Tour, which is very interesting. The Pro Tour is definitely a small factor in Magic's success. This idea that anybody can go to your local game store or local area, play in a Pro Tour qualifier, and then play Magic for large amounts of money is alluring. It is exciting to individuals. Some people even watch the games themselves. They're more interested, though, in playing in a Pro Tour than in watching Pro Tour games. What the podcast did not point out, though, is the importance of your local game stores. Now, this logo is from a local game store in Charlotte. Not sure how protectable the mark is. Might be a little bit on the descriptive side, but that's a whole nother issue. The lifeblood of Magic the Gathering is the local game stores. Magic made a huge mistake when Hasbro basically ordered them to shut down their retail unit. The retail stores overall, especially the gamekeeper stores where I was a store manager, were doing rather well financially. We had also expanded into larger spaces. We could have between 20 and 80 people in the store playing games on any weeknight. It was amazing. We created a community space where individuals could come and play Magic. It took Wizards a long time to figure out how to recreate this play space, how to incentivize companies to sell Magic and to create community space at the same time. Wizards has finally linked your ability to get premier product to creating events in the community. And that is extremely important because if people don't have a place to go, to play, to interact with other aficionados, they are going to lose interest. Local game stores are the lifeblood of Magic the Gathering. They are more important than the Pro Tour. The other thing that's fundamentally different about baseball cards from Magic the Gathering cards is that you get to be the hero. There's going to be a Grand Prix coming up in Vegas this year. We're looking at between 5 and 10,000 Magic players playing for tens of thousands of dollars. Anyone has a shot at doing really well in this. Your winners are probably going to be past Pro Tour players, but there's a random element in this game that keeps people playing. It does allow them a little bit of psychological relief when they lose, that they can blame it on the random elements. Now, if you want to become a really strong player, please, the game is usually not random. In every game, including the games that you win, you can go back and find mistakes that you and your opponent made. The random aspect really broadens the reach of the game and allows more people to play. If you're playing a game like chess or Go, where the outcome is determined at the beginning of the game between a master and an amateur, it really discourages people who aren't going to dedicate their entire life to becoming a master to play at these large competitive events. Magic's random element keeps more people playing and involved, and does give you a shot to occasionally beat a pro with some lucky draws. The other thing about these cards is that they're fundamentally useful. The cards themselves are played. If you've got a baseball card, you look at that card, it's got some statistics on it, you learn a little bit about it, but it doesn't affect the outcome of a game. When I go to a baseball game, it's up to the baseball players to win the game. When I go to a Magic tournament, I'm paying about the same amount as prices to a baseball game. I walk away from that Magic tournament with cards that I can use. And if I win, it is my fault, not someone else on the team that I support. What Magic has done is taken you and I and given us the opportunity to hit the home run out of the park. And that is what is so addicting about this game. Yes, the booster packs are interesting. They have rarities to them. There's a little bit of a gambling element there, but I am much more interested in that figuring out how to break the game, figuring out how to win some tournaments before those cards rotate out and new cards replace them. That intellectual challenge of being able to be the hero myself is what is so alluring about Magic the Gathering. Useful cards make the game. Surprisingly, the Planet Money podcast did not cover some of the negative mistakes that Wizards had really made during the last 20 years. Everything has not been roses. Wizards has made two major mistakes, which fortunately they've learned from, and I don't think they're ever going to make again. But one of those was printing too much product. They specifically mentioned that Wizards would go out, see if packs were selling at above retail, and print more. I think they did a decent job with the Dark of printing enough that individuals were okay with the demand. Yes, they sunk in price a little bit, but there were some good, useful cards in it. It was a fun set. Fallen Empires is where they really screwed up. They printed so much of this that no one wanted it. I went to sports card shows where there were cases of this sitting around that people could not give away at $20, $25 a box. The quality of the cards was also significantly lower than what you got out of Legends. Legends had cool heroes, multicolored cards that people could get behind that later were the inspiration for Elder Dragon, Highlander. Fallen Empires had very few useful cards. You could buy a box and get 2 or 3 useful cards out of it and nothing else. It was really a failure. Both the power level went down and the print run went up so much that people didn't want the cards. They also made a mistake by changing the core set to be these white border cards. They started in Unlimited, and yes, some of the Unlimited cards are crazy expensive, but that's because of something I'll mention a little bit later. But nobody likes the white border cards at all. It wasn't until 7th edition or until we see foreign Russian cards get printed in black border in these core sets that we see the sales really spike back up on these. People like black border cards. They look a lot better. They're more interesting to collectors. These mistakes that Wizards made, they've corrected and they've learned from. Now all cards are black bordered, and they've added these chase foil cards. Foil cards keep collectors engaged while not harming a player. If a foil card is going to be $200 or $300 and the non-foil is going to be $10, the collector has something to go after at the $200 mark, and the player doesn't need that shiny card in order to compete. They have an alternative at the $10. Having these two different target markets that don't have to directly compete with each other is extremely beneficial to the game long term. Wizards also has a monopoly on Magic's tournament play events. They can choose who puts those events on and who doesn't. And this control over that space is extremely important. In other collectibles, someone else can move into the market and create a competing item. With Magic, the way they've set up the competitive aspects of the game, the sanctioned tournaments, the pre-releases, only those that Wizards deems as acceptable get to play in that market. And that's very important for quality control issues. The reserve list is another major reason that Wizards of the Coast was able to keep collectors on. I hate this reserve list. Here's a whole nother video about the reserve list. You can look into it. But all things said, the idea that major cards like Black Lotus would never be reprinted did keep collectors involved. It gave them something to trade in as a stock, basically, while Wizards was off printing crazy amounts of the current cards to grow the player base. This is another example of where the bifurcation of collectors and players is very important, and you must deal with both in order to have this sustainable long-term economic model. Last thing that I would really like to add to this conversation is that there's a lot of great places out there to learn about Magic and finance. Quiet Speculation, MTG Stocks, the Reddit MTG Finance community, Ben Blideweiss, who was a consultant on that particular Planet Money episode, and Chaz Anders are two amazing writers that write in this area. If you're interested in learning more about Magic Finance, definitely follow the channel here because I'm going to cover 1 to 2 Magic Finance videos a month. But check out these other resources. They're all very well done. There's a lot that you can learn from them. Thanks. This has been Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech. Got a lot of exciting things coming out this next week. My next deck tech is coming out next week. It's going to be over an EDH deck. And my speculation video for the month is coming out next week. So stay tuned. Great stuff coming up. Thank you guys all so much for your comments on the Ask Anything. I'm working on the Ask Anything video also for next week. If you'd like to support the channel, please check us out on Patreon. It is what really makes this channel possible. I've been upgrading equipment, and I will continue to do so over the next few months. Please help improve the quality of these videos and contribute to the community here. Thanks.